What's up, everybody? Once again, it is I, James, coming to you from the Nerdy Musings podcast studio. I am happy to have the return of the Jedi, Mr. Joshua Derstine. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, how's it going, man? I'm doing great. Thanks for
It's,
having me on.
it's going good, buddy. It's good to have you back. You've been busy.
Yeah, I've wrapped up Amarok with all the pencils, and now I'm doing sample pages. So
Man, and you've been doing some awesome live videos and a little bit of art tutorials and things too, which I want to make sure that we chat about when we get into it because that's really cool to see.
yeah, for sure, man. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. So I was just going back. You were the fourth episode of this podcast,
Yeah.
and we have episode 50 is coming out this coming
Oh
Monday.
man, that's gonna be awesome,
Isn't
dude.
that crazy, man?
That's
It's gone
so
by so
crazy.
quick.
It's like the time just absolutely dissolves into nothingness.
It does. It's one of those things where you just get caught up in the routine on the grind,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
here we are however many months or a year later or
Right.
whatever it's
Yeah,
been.
yeah.
It's pretty cool. So in that time, in that interim since we last talked, you got Amarok all finished up. How does
Yep.
that feel for you?
Mostly just relieved. I'm just happy that it's done now, and I'm excited to move on to different things. So, like, really, when I was working on that series, it was a big period of growth for myself as an artist, and I kind of like shut out most of like social media and everything, and I really just focused on like honing my craft. And as you can see, even from like last year, my art style has evolved as I've, learned new things and changed and improved as an artist. So it's really been a big period of growth for me. And now that I'm sort of done with that, I feel like I kind of have the base of my art style and really where I want to take my art. So after that wrapped up, I've kind of just been exploring different avenues of like, those tutorials and things that you said. Now that I feel like I have a better understanding of who I want to be as an artist.
Definitely. And as part of that process of growth in your art, I know a big part of finishing up the Amarok book was going in there because your style had evolved so much
Hmm.
and your
Yeah.
skill had gone up so
Hmm.
much. You went in there and redid several pages. So
Yeah. Yeah.
because that had to be hard for you because a lot of
Hmm.
those original pages were completed so long ago, and your evolution of your
Yeah.
style and your skill is just leaps and bounds from where it was. So how
Hmm.
much of it did you get in there and change or redo?
Really, like the majority of it, I had quite a bit of stuff done, and I just wasn't vibing with it. So I really, I had to take a step back. And as I started doing like pages like near the end of the book, right, I realized, oh man, this is way different than what I was doing at the beginning. And I
Yeah.
don't necessarily regret, redoing it because I can look at the beginning of the book where I was and I can say, okay, this is where I was in my life. I was experimenting with a lot of stuff, and I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I think artists should experiment. And I think if you're really scared of failure, you're not exactly doing art right because failure is a necessary part of the process. So I don't look at it so much as like a loss as like just a constant process of learning.
Yeah, and I'm sure there was an element too, like you had so many people, backing the book early on
Yeah.
and everything, and to put that finished product together,
Hmm.
I mean, to be honest with you, like looking at the old stuff compared to the recent stuff, the stuff that you redid, it
Hmm.
looks like two different artists were working on the book, right? So I'm sure there was
Yeah.
an element of not wanting people to kind of be confused and
Right.
have the art change like partway in the book if you hadn't redone it.
Hmm. And that is sort of the difficulty of being an artist. And, this is a thing that like me and Ryan Stegman have talked about where it's like, as an artist, your work should constantly be evolving. The one issue with that, especially where I'm at, where I'm so sort of like green and juvenile to this whole art industry, is that I am progressing like very, very rapidly. So it's like, I kind of look at where I was, and it's like I'm in a completely different spot right now. But especially, I like to use Ryan Stegman as an example because you can look at different runs that he's done, like Scarlet Spider, Superior Spider-Man, Uncanny Avengers, and like all of those books have very distinctive art styles. And then obviously he had a massive change when he went over to Venom.
Yes.
And even now he's going over to X-Men. He's kind of leaning into more of that anime manga look. So it's like he's an artist that really changes a lot. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I have some of his original art and some of his first pages for like his very first work he did when he broke
hmm
in for Marvel and everything. And it's interesting to see he's kind of coming back around to the style that he had when he broke in. He was
yeah.
much more kind of that anime style and in the very animated looking with the
hmm
characters and almost that because I know he was and I'm sure he still is like heavily animation influenced
hmm
because I know a lot of the books that he had me buy and stuff were on
hmm
animation to help out with my
Yeah.
artwork.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see like he's letting that style creep back in again, and
hmm
it's just like you said, he's evolved so much. It's his stuff on
hmm
each project he does just varies, and I think it goes to what you're saying about pushing yourself and evolving and trying different things all the time.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, the thing with Ryan, I think he's at a point now where his art style sort of reflects the project. And depending on what project he's on, you can kind of see like even when he does like those pages with like Sabretooth or those big like muscular characters in the X-Men, he kind of goes back to that Venom style a little bit. So it's like he's a very adaptable artist now, which is really
Yeah.
cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely one of my favorites and somebody that I've always really looked up to, especially in the regard of being willing to share advice with
Yeah.
people that are coming up and helping, others while he's still, was very much in the process of figuring things out. Like when him and I were chatting way back in the day and we'd get on Skype and draw together and stuff. I mean, that was before he ever broke in or anything, but
Right.
he was still many levels above me and went out of his
Yeah.
way to help. So I think that's important. And I think that's kind of where you're in a place now to start doing that with up and coming talent and providing this guidance. So kind of tell me the idea behind these tutorials you've been doing and some of the, even the videos where we just get to watch you work live is
Mhm.
very helpful too for somebody who's wanting to improve their art. So when did you start leaning towards wanting to do that? And was a lot of that because now you have a little bit more time because you're not grinding away on
Mhm.
Amarok?
Mhm. Yeah, certainly. I knew once I finished Amarok, there was a certain set of things I wanted to do, and that was to make sample pages and start producing some sort of video content. I feel like as an artist, we're all sort of in this brotherhood because we all understand the stressors and the difficulties of becoming an artist. And the more you do it, the more you realize how difficult it is. And I think there's a very daunting process of like it feels like the journey of a thousand miles.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at younger artists and they, or just aspiring artists in general, it doesn't really matter what age they are, they can be kind of like confused or on where they want to go. And I was definitely at that point when I had started out. And it's very frustrating because it doesn't feel like there's like a really easy way to just jump into it and get started. So one of the things that I realized is that I'm such a process junkie. I absolutely love discussing process. I'm always bugging artists, they probably get annoyed with me. Like I'm always messaging like Rob Willis and those guys. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you up to? Like, what's your process? So it's like that's something I'm so passionate about. And I realized like I've been talking about this stuff with my friends and my girlfriend, and I'm sure she gets tired of that. So I realized this is something I really, really like talking about, and I'm pretty good at it. Like I know how to like kind of formulate my words to convey the theories that I've learned because the theories are so ingrained in my mind at this point where it just kind of comes naturally where I'm talking about like three-dimensional form or perspective. I can really just sort of wrap words together to get my point out. So I decided to just one day, hit record and see if I could come up with something that would be helpful to people. And once I got that audio recording, I just took like my Venom samples that I was working on, and I recorded a little bit of that process, and then I kind of edited it out. That's a hard word to say. I stitched it all together,
Yeah.
and then I just posted it online, and people were very receptive to it. So I've just been doing a few more of those, and it's crazy because I knew that the way that the Instagram algorithm works is that they're very receptive to reels now.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy the amount of reach that I've had through reels. Within like a week, I think I gained like 1,500 followers. And then I've
Yeah.
had
I've
some
been
like,
seeing you've been hitting all
yeah,
these milestones on your followers since you've been
yeah,
doing this.
yeah. I've had some like very huge, like prolific artists follow me that I like would never dream of following me. Like this
Just a
morning, like,
little obscure guy named
yeah.
Alex Ross recently.
Yeah, like Alex Ross, like not only did he follow me, but he liked my video. And I was like, what? That's so crazy because Alex Ross has such a completely different art style to what I do. So it's like, it's cool to see that he's into my stuff, I guess, even though he's very, very different. And recently, like Adelso Corona followed me,
Oh,
which was
amazing.
really cool. He's one of my favorite inkers. So that was really, really fun. So basically I've just been having fun, talking about the process and, going live and trying to really build up the community and see if like, if I can build an audience. So
Yeah. Well, an art is when you're an artist, it's such a lonely kind of solitary thing.
hmm
And a lot of artists, I think we talked about this a little before, oftentimes are a little bit more reclusive and
hmm
maybe, they're not able to get out there and interact with people to the level that they would be comfortable with. So
right.
having somebody like you who speaks the language and can break things down and can kind of take them along on this journey
hmm
with you, I think opens up a lot of new horizons for just artists in general, whether they're amateur or a pro. It's cool to see the process and see, you convey it well because you're passionate about it and you get what it's all about. You're not just
hmm
somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about putting these
Right.
videos. You have the passion and you've put in the work to be able to relay those skills and help people get up on their fundamentals, which is such a
hmm
huge part. I had somebody on here the other day and we were talking about how you have to master the ordinary before you can
Yeah.
command the extraordinary, right? So
Exactly.
just you doing these videos, like breaking down anatomy, breaking down rendering, like so many people don't know that with the cross
hmm
hatching, like
Yeah.
following the form and
Right.
not making everything look flat. Like
Yeah.
that's invaluable stuff that
hmm
a lot of people probably had to struggle for years before somebody told them that. Now they can go
Yeah.
on your Instagram and the video's right there.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of times when I see a lot of younger aspiring artists, David Finch is obviously such a prevalent influence on like almost all the young artists that you're seeing. He's such a big influence on it. But I always see these like glaring issues that I'm like, oh man, if you just tweaked this or if you just changed this a little bit differently, it would completely revolutionize like what you're doing. And I think the other part of that is that I come from a family where nobody's an artist, nobody draws, and nobody's really a nerd either. So anytime like I want to have a conversation with them, I have to know how to break it down to the absolute most basic level of these like very complicated like techniques and stuff that I'm doing. I have to know how to work it back to completely, help somebody who has no idea what I'm talking about. So that's what I try to do in these tutorials as well. And I think the other thing that's helpful with teaching, if you really want to challenge yourself to learn, you'll actually learn quite a bit from teaching because you have to understand exactly why you're doing everything that you're doing because most artists work off of instinct. So if we can really break down our techniques, it allows us to have a better understanding of what it is that we're actually doing.
Exactly. I was thinking about that before we got on here today and how it relates to my journey as a
hmm
jujitsu instructor. I started teaching well before I was a black belt in jujitsu just because of the circumstance in the area. There wasn't a lot of training
hmm
available, and I ended up in a position where I was teaching early on. And I
Yeah.
learned so much through teaching because it makes you hold yourself accountable. I would
hmm
often catch myself telling somebody to do something a certain way and then reflecting and going, wait, I don't do that detail
Yeah.
that I'm telling them to do. I'm
Yeah.
cheating.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Because
that's
so much
certainly,
is
yeah.
instinct, even in martial
Yeah.
arts, right?
Yeah. And that's certainly such a big part of it. And before I had kind of jumped into this like, hemisphere of like getting into the educational space, I'd always been like, I don't know if I'll ever be like ready to do that. And at some point you just kind of like got to jump in. And the thing that you realize is that everybody is constantly learning and we're all just at different points in our learning process. So if I have the opportunity to get in there and just give a few tips that I've learned, I think, that can hopefully be valuable to somebody.
Yeah. And you're early enough in your journey that all of that stuff is still very like prominent and fresh in your mind. Like a
Yeah,
lot of
for
the
sure.
revelations you've had, you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I can give this to somebody right away and they
Yeah,
don't have to
yeah.
struggle and
Hmm.
scratch and claw to get to that information like I did.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of something interesting. If we wrap back around to Amarok really quickly,
Yeah.
you can see those very early pages where I was kind of like almost pushing my style to the limit to where it would break. And what I mean by that is that I was so big into cross-hatching that I would see how much can I get away with this? Like how much cross-hatching can I do before it starts to break? And if you look at a lot of different artists, there tends to be a pattern of pushing your like cross hatching to the absolute limit before you kind of regress back into more simplistic cross hatching. And the best example I have with that is like Travis Charest. If you look at his early DC work and even his early Wildcats work, you can see he is going for that very Jim Lee style, of course, but he's also doing tons and tons of that cross hatching. And as he progresses as an artist and he's really more focused on communicating the form with cross-hatching rather than using cross-hatching as details, you can kind of see an evolution in his style.
Yeah, and that goes right back to what we were talking about, the commanding the extraordinary, mastering the ordinary, right?
Yes,
Like
yeah.
he had to master that form to really be able to
Hmm.
put that polish on it and have the rendering work in a
Hmm.
way that it enhanced the artwork instead of getting close to breaking it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
So,
another, oh,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead, go ahead.
That's another thing with cross-hatching is that for me, when I was learning how to do it, it was a constant battle between how much of this do I want to use to actually convey the form and how much of it do I want to use to like as a gradation out of the shadow, right? Because it's kind of playing in two worlds of conveying the form, but also kind of being your gray. And so that's why different guys like Philip Tan, who do that really detailed cross hatching, they're oftentimes, sometimes, especially if they're doing like a black outfit, they're using it to like as their gray tone. And so it can be a constant battle between like, you know, should I be using it to contour the form here or should I be using it to pull out of the shadows? So that's something that I found myself struggling with, and that's why I started making videos about it as well.
Well, the videos are awesome, and I hope that there's plenty more of them to come in the future because I know I'm learning a ton from a man. So keep it up on those for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to try and post one at least once like every weekday, a
Nice.
tutorial at least. Like today I did a like a written tutorial, just, trying something different. But yeah.
Yeah. And you're on there doing your live sessions too, where
Hmm.
like it's kind of this dual, combination that people can hit because they can watch your tutorials, but then if
Hmm.
you're on there on a live stream on Instagram, they can pop on there and ask you questions, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's another thing that I wanted to make sure I did is I started my live streams up, and that's just to kind of build a community, but also answer questions more in depth because different times I'll get DMs and it can be a really simple question of like, how do I get started? And it's like that's a simple question, but it's a very complicated answer. And so I really need a space where I can talk it out because I could text it out, but then I'll be texting for like 30 minutes and it's like that's kind of a waste of my time. So what what's convenient with the live streams is that I can work on like the boring part of my drawing where I don't really need to like have my brain on when I'm working. And then I can answer questions and hopefully give people a better idea of what to do and give more in-depth questions than I can, or answers than I can do in the Instagram Reels, because obviously those are very short format videos.
Right on. So let's transition now to where you're at coming out of Amarok. Now you're working on some sample pages. Do
Mhm.
you have an idea now that you're wanting to kind of develop a portfolio and
Mhm.
maybe make that leap into trying to see if you can get some work with some of the bigger publishers?
Yeah, certainly. So I am trying to develop my portfolio based around my interests and my strengths as well, while also like having a wide array of what I can do. So I'm sure you can tell with my art, I'm sort of into like the dark kind of gothic stuff, the very moody, maybe a little edgy stuff. So I actually chose the Donny Cates Venom, which is my all-time favorite comic book run. So it's only natural that the thing that got me into comics is the thing that I'm going to do my submissions with. And I'm using the script from Absolute Carnage, issue one. And the 3 pages that I chose like a good Venom one. I chose a good one with like some more boring stuff happening. And then at the very end of the sequence, it's the big reveal of like Absolute Carnage. And that's what I'm currently working on, where I really plan to just go all out and make him like super like ugly and have all these tendons and because Absolute Carnage is kind of like this resurrected Carnage, so it's like
Yeah.
zombie Carnage, so it's like Carnage on steroids, which is like perfect for me. Before I had started with the Absolute Carnage, I actually wrote like a very short Wolverine story that I felt like would have everything I need. But I actually got on the phone with John Livesey after I'd gotten a kind of far into it, but not too far. And he was like, um, you know, that's great. And they'll be happy to see that you know how to draw. But what they really want to see is if you can follow somebody else's script. And so that's where he really recommended to find somebody else's script. And that's why I sort of pivoted away from that. So if anybody's watching this and you are planning to do submissions to a company, they're really keen on if you can follow somebody else's script. Because even if you have a wonderful portfolio and they want to hire you, they're still going to give you a sample script after the fact to see if you can follow a script. So if you can just try and hit two birds with one stone, you might as well do that.
Yeah, it's so awesome that you have John as that
Yeah.
sounding board. He's not only an amazing inker, but I can see in how this guy carries himself and how he
Right.
interacts with others that he really cares and he wants to help.
Hmm.
So it's so neat that you guys were able to connect. I know that we talked about it on the last podcast, and I had him on here
Hmm.
after that. And so what's he experiencing with those new Amarok pages? He has to be grinding away on those. There's a
Yeah.
lot of rendering.
Yeah.
I told him when I had him on, I'm like, oh, he definitely picked the right guy to do these,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
for some inkers that would be kind of a daunting type of
Yeah.
line work to handle.
John is like very rarely do you find an artistic collaboration where the other person just kind of gets you and they kind of get what you're doing. And John is one of those very rare inkers who really hones in on the detail and really does that very extreme sort of Mark Silvestri-esque, Stephen Platt-esque rendering, and they don't shy away for it and they just go all out with it. And it's very awesome to see what he does. And I'm very grateful that, he's taking time to work on these and they are loaded with detail. So prayers for John, but
Yeah, just everybody send prayers up for John.
yeah,
He's slaving
yeah,
away on those pages.
right,
But
yeah,
man, not only does he like take what's there, but he takes what's there and he enhances it. And that's
yeah,
the other
yeah,
mark of an amazing inker is they can take even, because your pencils are really tight,
hmm,
and you put everything in there that you want to be relayed, but John's so good that he'll take that and he'll even make it look better,
yeah,
because he
yeah,
can he can go in there and maybe interpret something in a way that you didn't think of, that where it
yeah.
enhances it.
Yeah, certainly. And very rarely do you find inkers that can actually handle tight pencils really, really well and add to it rather than taking away from it. And John is one of those people that really, really adds to my pencils because honestly, my pencils are at a point where you could probably just color directly on the pencils, but I really, really enjoy what John has to add to it. And That's what I really enjoy from my favorite inkers like Matt Bat Banning, Danny Mickey, Adelso Corona. All those guys are very additive inkers and they have their own individual inking styles regardless of the artist that they're working on. So it's really cool to see what they do with everybody's pencils.
Yeah, definitely. With the samples that you're doing,
Mhm.
you're just focused on penciling, right? Like I think
Yeah.
that's another tip for people that are trying to, put together a portfolio. And I
Mhm.
remember hearing this way back in the day, like from I think it probably was on the comic book greats videos with McFarlane and those guys, is where, hey, if you're wanting to break in as a penciler, don't show up with full color penciled inked colored
Yeah.
stuff in your
Yeah.
portfolio. Like, have your portfolio be the predominantly the
Mhm.
thing that you be the
Mhm.
predominantly the thing super.
Yeah, now I will add on to that where I don't think individual artists should ink or color their work if they're only trying to get like penciled work. There are a few artists who like do everything, and at that point you just include make sure all of it's colored, right? If you're going to do that. But I will say, if you're like an individual penciler and you have like a buddy or your friends, for example, I'm friends with John, and I'm going to be including, like John said, he would ink one of those Venom pages that I'm doing, just so that I can show Marvel, what kind of inker I feel like works over me the best. And then I'm
Yeah,
also going to be including um, that Spider-Man Venom piece that John inked, and I actually got Frank Martin to color that, and
very nice.
he colored Venom for Stegman, and right now he's on Absolute Batman. So just sort of getting like some professional artists and showing like, hey, this is what professional artists look like over my line work. But yeah, predominantly the portfolio is going to be pencil based with at the very end like showing them like, hey, here's what my stuff does look like when it's inked and colored by other professionals.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think too, like not only having the inked piece in there to show them here's the type of inker I think that meshes well with me, but
Hmm.
also just to see how your pencils translate to
Yeah,
ink,
yeah.
to how they're going to be in the printed form. I think that can be of value as well.
Oh yeah, it's a big value, especially I feel like with my pencils, it would be very easy for an a poor inker to get lost and to sort of muddy up everything that I am indicating with my pencils. So it's really important to show that like, hey, my pencils are good, but I just need a really good inker who's going to know how to clarify things when it comes to fully black and white. And that's sort of something I was talking in my tutorial is that when you're drawing comics, you have to keep in mind that this is a purely black and white art form. I mean, yes, there is like technically outliers to that rule, like anything with Alex Ross, of course, that's, he's painting. But when it comes to like classic Western comics and you're working with a team of a penciler, an inker, and a colorist, it's like when you're doing those pencilers with the intent of giving them to an inker, you have to be aware that it's only going to be able to be black and white. And that's why cross hatching is such an important thing because that is your gray tone. It's the illusion of gray.
Yeah, I am noticing a lot more lately. I've been, because I look at stuff on the iPad.
Hmm.
I view the majority of my comics on the iPad,
Hmm.
and sadly, the close-up vision's starting to go. I'm
Hmm.
finally to that point in my life where
Yeah.
I'm having to wear reader glasses and things, but on the
Yeah.
iPad I can zoom in when
Right.
I need to. But through that zooming in, I'm noticing a lot of the people's art and a lot of the recent books, including the
Hmm.
new the Pepe Larraz Amazing
Hmm.
Spider-Man book.
That was
That's all
awesome.
pencils. Like you zoom in, it's
Yeah.
pencil and stuff. It's not inked. So it's
Hmm.
kind of interesting. I've been noticing that on a lot of books that if
Hmm.
the I think Netho Diaz is another one on
Yeah.
the X-Men stuff. If you
Yeah.
zoom in on that, you can see that it's not inked on a lot of it. Some of it was,
Yeah.
but there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff recently where they're just shooting straight off the tight
Hmm.
pencils.
And that's certainly, like something that the companies do, especially if they don't want to pay an inker. They're just going to go right off the tight pencils. But if you're, sending in like portfolio pieces of like fully finished comic pages, and it's like these really nice graphite drawing with all this blending and everything, they'll usually reject you just because they want to see that you can be inked rather than, this guy does really awesome,
Yeah.
pencil line work, but we can't get anybody to ink him. So.
So with this process of putting the portfolio together, obviously there's going to come a point where you need to start shopping this stuff around.
Mhm.
So what are your plans? Are you thinking about hitting up cons and going that
Mhm.
route? Are you going to be emailing stuff off? Obviously, you have
Mhm.
some connections now that you've developed,
Mhm.
with some pros and everything. So that might be an avenue of getting your stuff seen. What are your thoughts on that? What are you planning once they're completed? What are you thinking your approach is going to be?
Well, I actually have a pretty like detailed out approach just to make sure I can do it as best as I possibly can. So Ryan actually, Ryan, as we were saying, he's an amazing guy. He's very helpful, but more than that, he's a really, really like good person, and he's really good at like, telling editors like, hey, maybe you should look at this guy, or maybe we could hire this guy. And he actually said that he would show my stuff to Ricky Purdon, which is
Oh, sweet.
the talent manager for Marvel. So when I get that done, that's obviously going to be like the plan A. Plan B will just be like like email everybody I can find, anybody from like Marvel, DC, like, hey, look at my stuff, please. And then I'm gonna have like a list of references from different professionals that I know. Like I know Chris Campagna said he would be a reference. Ryan Stegman, V. Ken Marion, those guys, they're all incredibly, incredibly helpful. So hopefully, with that sort of backing from some of their best artists, they might be interested in it a little bit more. And then if that all fails, New York Comic Con. So
Okay.
yeah,
Hit the grind. Yeah.
right,
Go
yeah,
put
yeah,
feet on the street and
yeah,
do it the old fashioned way,
right,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
certainly.
it's different now because there's so many different avenues for people
Hmm.
to get their work seen.
Hmm.
Like, obviously, you've built an incredible social media following over the
Hmm.
years, and a lot of other artists, you go out there and you see so many people. Like, I say this all the time on here. You could probably sit on Instagram for the next year
Hmm.
straight and keep discovering new amazing artists you didn't know
Yeah,
exist, right?
yeah, yeah.
So with that comes, it's like a double-edged sword because yes, you have more availability
Hmm.
to have your work seen,
Yeah.
but you're also competing with hundreds of thousands of other
Hmm.
amazing people out there. So
Yeah.
what do you think is the nature that you need to approach it to set yourself apart from
Hmm.
the other people out there? Is it just the community and making
Hmm.
the connections and developing these, genuine friendships and relationships with other people
Hmm.
that have the same interests and the same goals as yourself?
Yeah. It's certainly about, social networking and building connections with different artists or even writers, and just like, different people that can help you not only get better as an artist, but also like show your work to more people. Like even when I was at C2E2 last year, and I was talking to Ryan after the show, like he like pulled up like Chip Zdarsky and was like, look at this kid, right? So it's like that's definitely a big thing, and I think you also have to understand like how to build genuine connections. Like it's like not every artist is going to talk to you, but some of them will. And if you can get to that point, make sure you're not bothering them or wasting their time, and
Yeah.
that you're asking useful, productive questions. And like for me, I consider myself extremely blessed and extremely lucky because when I was really just starting out as an aspiring artist, that was during COVID. Am I allowed to say that on YouTube? I don't know. You can
Yeah, I
cut it
think
out
so.
if I can.
I'm
There
not
used to
monet
be
I'm not monetized or anything, so I don't think that anything will
that
happen.
just like flashed in my mind where it's like I might not be able to say that and I might get the whole thing taken down. But
They'll
during
probably just
COVID,
put like the COVID disclaimer on it and something like
yeah,
that.
I mean, obviously that was a terrible, terrible period for
Yeah.
everybody, and it was just not a great time. But for me personally, it was really beneficial to me because as an artist, I didn't have to go to school anymore. I could just stay home and draw. And along with that came all these artists starting up live streams. And I'm talking about artists who normally would never ever have time to do that, or they wouldn't even consider doing that. They started up these live streams, the best examples being David Finch and Ryan Stegman. And I was able to just, show up every single night that they were live streaming and chat with them in the live chat. And it's like eventually they started putting my name with my art and they were like, hold on, this guy's like, I see something here. I want to help him. And because of that, I've been very blessed to build such a good connection with especially those two individuals in general.
Yeah.
But especially if you're a young artist and you're looking to improve, somebody that I always recommend reaching out to is Brett Booth. I believe he's on Blue Sky now. And if you tag him and, I believe he's on Blue Sky now. And if you tag him and, put your like best drawing forward and say, hey, now obviously he's very busy on Spawn, but if he has the time, he will like resketch your entire piece of art and fix a lot of the issues that you're facing with your figure work, and he'll improve and like, completely change and revolutionize the way that you're thinking about your figures. So other than that, it's just like posting consistently, maybe even advice that I've gotten is like, for example, Absolute Batman's a great example, but any writer that you like and they're working on like this new book or they've got this new character or like they've redesigned a character, you could draw that iteration of the character and then tag them and they'll typically see it and share it out. Now, you don't want to like tag them with every single drawing you do because that gets annoying, but like what writer doesn't like to see something that they've created, brought to life by an artist? So that's a really good way to gain recognition if you're sort of looking to try to get your name out there a little bit.
Yeah, those are all great tips. Let's talk a little bit now about process because I know you're just like me. You're a process junkie,
Yeah.
and we just drool over any of that stuff, whether it be a thumbnail sketch or a rendered
Right.
drawing.
Yeah.
So when we talk about process, let's delve a little bit into your process these days. Are you doing a fully traditional work? What would the word be?
Workflow?
Yeah, workflow.
Yeah.
Would you be doing a traditional workflow, or are you doing, as Dan Fraga would say, tradigital, to where you're doing your layouts like maybe on your iPad, and then you're printing those out on the board in Blue
Yeah.
Line and going into your pencils from there? What's your workflow look like these days?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up because I really like the word tradigital and
Yeah, me
Fraga's,
too.
he's just a great guy at coming up with like fun words and
And he's
combining
streaming all the
words.
time
Yeah,
again and
yeah,
showing
those are
us,
really
taking us
cool.
along on that journey with finishing up his
Yeah,
Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, the Black Flag book.
yeah, his stuff is awesome, awesome. Typically, I watch it on the rewind, and so I don't get to be there live exactly, but it's still really cool to see. And yeah, so I actually use Tradigital, and I think for me that's kind of the future of like comics because you still get that really awesome like pencil work, but you get to do a lot of the stuff that requires very heavy intensive like thinking and redoing and fixing. You can do that on digital, which is way easier. So what I'll typically do is either on my iPad or just I always recommend people to, instead of, if you want to be a comic artist, maybe consider just getting printer paper over a sketchbook because so many times sketchbooks can be very pricey and we can kind of have this thing where we make them a little too sacred and we're
Yes.
almost like scared to draw in them, right?
I have
So the
many.
thing,
I have a whole bookshelf downstairs
yeah, yeah,
full of unfilled, fancy looking sketchbooks for
right,
that exact
right.
reason.
Because it's like, once I'm good enough, I'll fill this entire thing. And it's like, oh, you're never going to be at that level where you're that confident. So if you just get like the 500 stacks of like printer paper, it's like, this is just, it's essentially I can just draw. And if I hate it, I can throw it away. No biggie. And it just allows me to get my ideas out very, very quickly. And as a comic artist, you're going to need to put so many of your ideas down because each page, like each panel on a comic book page is like an individual piece of art that you have to compose in and of itself. So I always recommend like just printer paper, but Sometimes I'll sketch on the iPad and just go straight from there, but if I'm not, I'll just do like a really quick doodle on layout on my printer paper, take a picture of that. I imported into Procreate personally. I know that a lot of comic artists use Clip Studio Paint, but for me, that always felt so robotic, and I really enjoy the organicness of Procreate. It just
Yeah.
feels more like drawing to me.
It's interesting. Yeah. And I don't want to take you off. Let's talk about that after you finish up your
Yeah,
thought here.
yeah, for sure. And I'll just import that, and I actually use Fraga's brushes, which he's offering for free. So if you go to his live streams, there will usually be a link where you can go and download them. My personal favorite is the finishing pencil. I just like how that one feels. And then I will typically complete my layout. And I do kind of what Brett Booth does, where he'll do like the thumbnail sketch, and then he'll do the entire sketch again, but with no line weights, no nothing, just getting all the information down before he renders it. So I will do that process digitally, so I'll have all the information I could need, and then once I'm done with that, I will print it out on blue line and pencil over it very tightly, similar to how an inker prints out pencils in blue line and then they ink on top of it. I just do that with my layout. And in my opinion, some of the best artists, that's what they do. Ryan Stegman does that process. Daniel Warren Johnson does that process. Pepe Larraz. I know he does a lot of work digitally, but when he does do it traditionally, that's the process that he takes. And for me, it makes the most sense if you want to be a traditional artist. And the printer that I use, it's really nice. It's a Epson. It's 11 by 17, and it has a scanner, and it's only like $200, which is a relatively good price for a scanner
Bro,
printer combo.
they've come down a lot. I
Yeah,
have this
yeah,
beast over here. I have this
yeah.
gigantic Epson 1400 photo,
Right.
whatever, because it
Yeah,
was one of the first around the time that could do the
yeah,
large format. And
yeah,
this thing, I don't even want to say how much it cost. At the time, it was very
yeah,
expensive because
yeah.
I think with the demand for the larger
Hmm.
format printers, they become more affordable. Yours has a scanner built in. Mine's just a
Yeah,
friggin' gigantic.
right.
It's like this wide,
Yeah,
dude. I'm a
yeah.
big guy.
It's
I'm holding my
crazy.
hands really far apart.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, and that's actually the thing is I got mine for like 300 and now it's at like 200. So it's like
Yeah.
even the ones that were cheaper to begin with, the price is still going down to this day. So if I think it's like the 7820. So if you're watching this and you want a really good, it scans, and I always get it to scan in 300 DPI. I don't know, maybe it can go up to 600, but yeah, that's the one I use, and it's worked really good for me over the years. So I'm very blessed to have that one.
Definitely. Yeah, this tradigital process, I think,
Hmm.
another, before we talk about kind of Procreate versus Clip Studio, because I've made that observation too. And I
Yeah.
think you put it in a really good way that Clip Studio feels more robotic.
Hmm.
But another benefit I'm finding of digital, and I think a lot of aging artists like myself are finding. I was
Hmm.
talking a little bit about the close-up vision. I have an astigmatism, so sometimes it'll, if
Yeah.
I'm not wearing my proper glasses, it'll make things warped. So I'll do my drawing, but when I flip it, I see where my vision has messed up, like where I
Right.
thought it was straight or
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
the proportion.
Yeah.
So, with the benefit of digital, one, I can flip it super
Yeah.
quick and flip back and forth and find those mistakes.
Hmm.
But if I find a proportional error, I can use the lasso
Yep.
on that rough drawing, lengthen that arm out, change this, change that so rapidly. I feel like the benefit of digital, and I get the people that are completely traditionalists, but I think digital is actually going to help um, artists go longer in their
Hmm.
careers.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
the stuff where vision affected them, you
Hmm.
can literally zoom in as much as you
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
and find that line and everything. I was
Yeah.
listening to Klaus Jensen. He actually does
Hmm.
some inking digitally now.
Oh yeah.
Like he still does traditional, but he's like, yeah, he's like, I love the digital tools. It lets me go
Yeah.
in there and keep doing this stuff.
Yeah. However, I will say I think a lot of young artists tend to gravitate towards digital, and sometimes that can stunt your process a little bit because you don't have to go through the hardships that you're experiencing when you're doing a traditional drawing. So if you are just starting out, I think it's incredibly valuable to learn how to do all of this traditionally and, get frustrated when your sketch doesn't work out 20 different times and you have to keep redoing it, because digital obviously streamlines it and it makes it easier, but that can be a little dangerous if you don't already have the knowledge that comes from traditional art. So I think it's incredibly helpful later in your art journey, but, I think it's important. Everything kind of needs, I'm trying to think of the word.
You still need that foundation. It's
Yeah,
just like what
yeah,
we were
yeah,
talking about. I
exactly.
mean, I'll preface it with exactly what Joshua said. Like, get the skills traditionally, and
Hmm.
then let the iPad or the digital tools be just that. They are a
Yeah,
tool to
yeah.
help you once you've mastered those skills. It's not a replacement for
Hmm.
acquiring those skills in the traditional manner. Like somebody
Hmm.
who's been drawing a long time is going to be able to utilize the tool better,
Yeah,
and it's not a shortcut. Digital shouldn't be a
right.
shortcut. It should
Yeah.
be there to enhance and help with your workflow and enhance the things you already have.
Yeah, certainly. And even going back to that, I think if I were to do finished digital work, which I haven't really done, I've done it a couple of times, but I think I would probably sketch it out in Procreate and then see if I could finish it in Clip Studio, because I know that Clip Studio has really, really, really nice brushes and really, really nice ink brushes that are sort of handcrafted for comics. And one thing that really blew my mind is that the inker Daniel Enriquez, he's like fully digital when he inks his work. And even Glappy on the new book that he's doing, I'm pretty sure that's all digital, which is crazy because like if you look at Enrique's and his ink work, it looks even more traditional than some traditional inkers.
Yeah, you can't really
So
tell. A lot of people
yeah,
that ink digitally, you can usually spot it, but there's a few
right.
guys out there where you wouldn't know unless they
Yeah,
let you behind the curtain.
yeah, yeah, certainly.
So let's talk a little bit about Procreate versus Clip Studio Paint.
Hmm.
Like Clip Studio Paint was specifically designed to be for comic artists. Like it
Yeah.
has all the panel creation tools and
Hmm.
all the perspective stuff before other
Hmm.
programs had like the ability to do the perspective rulers and the
Hmm.
grids and all of that. And
Yeah.
for all intents and purposes, it should be the thing that all comic book pros who work digitally use. But for whatever reason, Procreate just feels better.
Yeah. Well, that's because Clip Studio lacks the organicness of Procreate. And really anything in art as humans, we are oftentimes drawn much more to like organic looking art. That's why you always get that weird feeling when you see AI art because it's uncanny and it lacks that organicness that naturally comes from like your hand. And that's why Daniel Warren Johnson and James Herron and I think it's Nick Batara and who's the guy in Absolute Batman right now?
Dragoda.
Yeah, Nick Dragotta. Um, all those guys, you can really tell that they like hand drew it, and so our minds naturally sort of gravitate towards this very organic looking art, and that's something that Procreate provides, where any of the shorthands and the signals that you need to like undo or redo, or you can double tap your Apple Pencil to erase, and the general format of it is way more streamlined. I tried to open Clip Studio and it's got like, 100 different things that I can mess with or open with. And it's very much more focused on the complexity, which is really
Yeah.
great for people that like computers and they like messing with all that stuff. But most artists really just want to get in there and draw with the most organic feeling that they can, and even down to the way that you can make brushes on Procreate, or the way that a lot of their brushes operate, it's much more organic than
Yeah,
Clip
it's way
Studio.
more intuitive.
Yeah,
Way more intuitive. You feel like you need to have a 10,000 page manual to find
right.
out where a
Yeah,
basic function is in Clip
yeah,
Studio.
Yeah.
whereas you can pretty much figure out where everything is in Procreate pretty quick. And
Yeah.
another point I'll bring up with the reason I think Procreate resonates a lot more with most people is because any of us that are familiar with Photoshop,
Hmm.
they intentionally made Procreate very similar
Hmm.
in its layout and functionality to Photoshop.
Hmm.
Whereas you go into Clip Studio and it can be a little more overwhelming. Like it has all the Photoshop type stuff, but it kind of lacks that feel, like the naturality of it, like you were saying, the organicness. So when you go into Procreate, like the other thing is it has all that stuff. It's just hidden in like all these different gestures and things. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
watched a video the other day. It was like 60 things you didn't know in Procreate, and
Hmm.
it was like, holy cow, this program,
Yeah.
this app can do everything,
Yeah.
everything and more than you would imagine.
And here's the thing is once you memorize those gestures, like you're good to go. Um, and I feel like Clip Studio is much more difficult to actually memorize all the different shortcuts. But with Procreate, it's like it's got all these gestures, and we're as artists, we're like, we're kind of used to like, you flip your pencil over and there's an eraser on the back. Procreate just kind of adds on to that, like, you know, streamline of thoughts. And I actually, there's a new thing that they came out with apparently that I really like because I'm so detailed for the Apple Pencil where it's got like this metal nib at the end.
Oh,
And so I always found that the actual tip on my Apple Pencil always felt a little blunt.
where
And
did you get that?
I'll email you the link after
Okay,
this
okay.
stream.
Keep your
Um,
secrets.
I can't remember it off the top of my
No
head.
worries.
It might be like rock, paper, scissors or something
Okay.
like quirky or
It
gimmicky
makes
like
the
that.
tip feel a little more natural for drawing on there.
So for me personally, I've talked to Dan Fraga about it and he doesn't really care, but that's because he never sharpens his pencil, so he likes that blunt tip. But for me personally, it was a huge game changer in me actually fully like going towards doing all my layouts digitally because before it was always like, oh, this is fun and all, but it's not really the precision that I need. And when I found this like metal tip and it comes with its own screen protector so that it's like
Not
good for the metal
scraping your
tip and it's
iPad
not
up.
scratching it up.
Yeah.
But you know, that really was a huge game changer for me because suddenly it's so much more precise and it feels more like the feeling that I get like if I'm drawing with like a mechanical pencil or something. So I'll definitely have to email you the link and maybe you
Yeah,
can put
please
that
do.
in the description of this video or something because I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I've had really good results with it.
Yeah,
So
we'll definitely do that. So, as we wrap things up here, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of let everybody know where Amarok is in the process of getting it to the point where the book is done and ready to go
mhm,
out. Because obviously now that you completed your part, it has
mhm,
to be inked and all that
mhm.
kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
how are we looking on the progression of things in the timeline?
Yeah, so all the pencils for Amarok are done, but the thing with hiring Marvel and DC artists, which is what I did to sort of collaborate on it, is that they're working for Marvel and DC, right? So they're always very busy. So John has been like chipping away on the pages while he's doing his Marvel work, and I try to call him at least once a week, and I called him last week, and he told me that he'd get me some scans really, really soon. So hopefully here we'll have a Indiegogo update where we can put out, some of the finished inked art and then I can get that over to Andrew Dollhouse and we can get that colored. But yeah, everything really is up to those guys now. So, if you're a praying person, pray for John because
Yeah.
he's got the big workload now. So, but yeah, hopefully I can get some inked pages because I know that he's been chipping away on quite a few of them and we've got the ball sort of rolling. So that's where Amarok's at the moment.
Awesome, man. Well, at the end, I always like to give the spotlight to the guest and
Hmm.
let you promote anything you want to promote. Let everybody know where they can find you, where they can watch the live streams and find the art tutorials and things. And before you do that, I just want to thank you for coming on again today, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I always have a very wonderful time when I'm on these streams, and you always ask very artist-friendly questions, and it's really, really fun and an incredible experience to get the opportunity to talk process with you. So,
My pleasure, brother. Thanks for your kind words, and I definitely want to have you on again.
yeah, of course, man,
We got to do
anytime.
a trilogy. We're Star
Yeah,
Wars
dude.
guys. We got to have that
Right,
trilogy,
of
right?
course. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, take it away with your pitch as far as where people can find you and where they should follow, like,
Mhm.
subscribe, all that wonderful stuff.
Yeah, so right now I mostly post on Instagram, and that's where I'm posting daily tutorials, at least on the weekdays. And I'm doing live streams, and I'm having other posts that I'm putting up on Instagram. So that's really the place I would recommend following me, and that's Joshua.Derstine. I am also on Twitter. Now, I haven't posted on Twitter in a while, but once I get all the sample pages wrapped up, I'll be quick firing those things out on Twitter. So that's usually typically the best place to find the highest resolution for my art. Instagram sort of lowers the resolution when you post, which, that's just the platform. I may be starting something like a YouTube or a Patreon here soon. So that's like something I have in the background at the moment. So just stay tuned for that and get all the updates on Instagram.
Excellent, man. Well, hang out with me for a moment while I do my little spiel and hit the outro.
Yeah, for sure.
Everybody, make sure you go follow Josh on all the things. I will be putting all the links in the description. Check out our podcast on YouTube. I always recommend the YouTube version, but you can listen to it on any major audio podcast platform. And in the meantime, keep it nerdy.